It's just like the last time I was in LaGuardia, I was sitting there. I've always liked it because it seems like it's more convenient because I lived in Queens, so it just seemed real convenient. But it's just falling apart, you know.
Man,
I just remember the last time I was in there was some woman just sitting next to me, and I just watched like a cockroach crawl out of her bag and just like onto the floor, and I was just like, this is so LaGuardia right now.
Man, that's New York. That's New York. That's not just New LaGuardia, man. That's everywhere in New York.
Yeah.
New York is a real dump. It's a dump.
It is.
No matter what anybody says.
A beautiful dump.
But then all of a sudden, now check this out.
Yeah.
Then you see this glimmer of hope. My gorgeous, dear lady from almost 20 years now, she's a cultural freak. She loves the arts to death. She's a music teacher.
Uh-huh.
And she's my dear heart. I love her to death. She decided that we were going to go and see Porgy and Bess at the Metropolitan Opera House.
Whoa.
Man, what a difference between New York City and its element, and then walking into that environment, that incredible artistic environment. I was devastated with the contrast of how you can come out of this cesspool of life into the most incredible artistic environment.
High art.
Artistry at its highest in the realm of opera, the orchestra, let alone Ira Gershwin. Ira Gershwin? No, George Gershwin.
Yeah.
Make sure you cut George Gershwin.
Get your Gershwin straight.
Man, George Gershwin, what a prolific writer he was. I had no idea, and I had no idea he wrote the music for Porgy and Bess. I never even thought about it. And then to even take it another level higher, the orchestrator. I forgot what his name was, but he was I guess he was the gentleman that orchestrated Rhapsody in Blue for him. What an amazing musical experience for me as a musician. And it just set me back to the reason why I wanted to play music, or at least attempt to try to play music.
Yeah. And
the things that I appreciate as a kid, as a little kid, because accidentally I would see these things on television. You know, being born in the 50s, television, radio was completely different. It was educational. It was artistic, even with the simple things and mundane things that came on. Yeah. The television, on the radio, they were incredible. Yeah. They were rich with culture, rich with artistry, even the simplest things, even a simple commercial.
You know, I fully get that. I don't want to derail you. I want you to stay on that path, but just real quick, I just think it's funny that just last night, I have this weird thing where I'll start watching ephemeral films, documentaries from the 50s, and a lot of them are just kind of mundane stuff. But just last night, I was watching a documentary that the Caterpillar Corporation had put together, and it was like, you know, they make all the earth movers and bulldozers and all that stuff. But it was it was a 30-minute documentary narrated by Walter Cronkite, beautiful cinematography. The narrative was this like sort of aspirational, beautiful narrative about, the interstate system and what this means, and, you know, all this, and that we are sort of the drivers, you know, as Caterpillar Company of this kind of new frontier, you know. But they made something so kind of normal, construction-y kind of stuff. They made it into this beautiful, poetic, very high quality thing, and that was just back then. Everything was kind of made with that intention. Yeah, you know. So anyway, it kind of reminds me a little bit of what you're talking about in terms of just that there was purpose and artistic vision, even in the mundane, in a different way than it is now. Yeah. I mean, to be sure, Caterpillar is monumental. Mm-hmm. You know, in their quest for construction and whatever they're doing, you know. They're doing. But now, what year did that come out? Do you remember? It was like 56. There you go. You don't even have to say anything else. 57? 1950s. Yeah. 1950s was a prolific year, I think, in entertainment
in every realm.
And art.
Just art. I'm a monster movie freak, science fiction freak. I love this stuff. And all my favorite science fiction movies, all that stuff came from the 50s, from the beginning to the end of the 50s. When it got to the 60s, it was over with. Sort of. I mean, there were some things that kind of impressed me, but the biggest things that impressed me and left a mark on me were in the 50s because of the way they did it. The level of artistry and production was completely different than what we have today, I think, personally. What they had available to them, they used the creative mind and they used their artistic genius that was given to them by God. Remember that. They used their artistic genius to create this illusion to us, that they pulled us into this story. For me, as a kid, they pulled me into this story about this monster tearing up buildings and things. So, the fight of man against this thing that's going to take over the world, and it's bigger than life. It was so impressive to me. So all those things that you're talking about, you mentioned this documentary, it's from the 1950s. I think, for me, I think that was some of the best years of true artistry in every realm.
Yeah, it's interesting, like, because it's like post-war optimism. The middle class was doing well. The impetus for everything was really around sort of family, and there was centralized kind of focus on, I think, in the broader culture, on just everybody being okay and doing the best things that we can do. I mean, obviously culturally, a lot of things were still very behind, but at the same time, it's hard not to look at that as to see like the 50s as a particular golden era across anything that you can identify, right? Like if you look at film, you look at art, at the abstract expressionist works turning art on its head, or you look at bebop, or you look at automobiles, or it doesn't matter what you're talking about, everything can. And I think that what was unique, I wasn't there, you were there, but I guess what seems to me, I mean, I was born in the early 70s. I've kind of had this weird warm feeling about the 70s in the way that you do about the 50s, but I guess my thought is just that perhaps it's the 50s, I think, were just these firsts for a lot of things, a lot of story ideas, or a lot of concepts, or a lot of things sort of came to fruition and became their own in that time at the same time. And then everything that's happened since has been sort of an echo or a remake, or like like I'm gonna go see somebody play dinner jazz and they're pretending like they're in the 1950s, or I don't know, like it's become like its own thing. Right.
Yeah. Anyway,
carry on.
I didn't mean to get off on that thing, but that's those things are, I have a high appreciation for art and music and
monster movies.
Well, I think if I wasn't so into playing music and playing bass, that probably would have been a special arts artist, like a stop motion. Stop motion is just, to me, is an alien thing. It's so prolific. It's incredible in the process, and it's incredible the result, because the result brings the story across in such a vivid way. Yeah,
I wonder what it is about stop motion that just as a medium, there's something about it that works with our brains or something. You know what I mean? It's something in our perception.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. It's the visual effect that it has. Bringing something that's usually not animated, that sits still, and bringing that thing to life in a way and that is almost unearthly. It's unreal. It's like a nightmare. To me, it's like an incredible nightmare. Yeah. Some of them are good nightmares, but a lot of them, when you're in this, especially in the realm of monster movies, it's scary because of the way the visual effect of it.
I also think that a lot of if you're talking about like horror, as time has gone on and what's happening now, everything's more about special effects and jump scare type of things. It's more like this amusement ride, as opposed to when things were more primitive. Those constraints were actually good because it put the burden on the story.
Exactly.
And so you could create this anxiety and this fear element or whatever in a much, I think, deeper, more felt kind of way, because it wasn't relying on theatrics.
Well, the artistry, the artists back then, I think. Now I know we're getting way off away from music, but I because I want to talk about the music thing.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm really into this thing because it affected me so much. Yeah. Every time they used this technique, stop motion. I think there's a couple of stop motion artists that I researched back from the 20s and 30s, and I really got into it. It was really an incredible art form because they really the artist never lost sight of the vision of the story. And he did, in his creative mind, he stayed true to the story. And in fact, what he did was, to me, he brought the story, boom, to a tremendous level of reality. Even if it's fictional, he brought it to a level of reality that was beyond our imagination.
Yeah.
And that effect of that artistry is what makes it so great. And I don't think today, in some realms, and I don't think today they have the same effect, because, like you said, it's more special effects. And when they do introduce the idea of story, I think it goes way beyond what it needs to do. There's too much of that and not enough. There's not enough of a balance, of creative balance of the two, of the story and the special effects that tell a story.
Yeah.
Now,
like everything's all payoff. It's all soloing or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's personalities more than it's the true art. Like the old actors and actresses, it was the art. It was the character role that was impressive, and that's what made them who they were.
Yeah.
Now, the personalities are dropped in each of these spaces, and the personality takes over instead of it being character role. Do you follow? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in sort of folding it into sort of the musical conversation, I feel like, for someone like you that has, this ability to play, beyond the realm that most humans have ever really been, right? Like you're a frontiersman on a lot of levels, and you're you probably don't think about it this way necessarily, but it's like, if you think about all the humans that have ever played bass, right? Like you're in this particular place with that, where you've experienced and achieved and learned a lot of things. And I think what I think is interesting is like hearing you talk about film and narrative and the power of story and the balance. I feel like those are all sort of naturally musical thoughts, and I think that when you talk about the great actors really thinking of things as art, as opposed to how is this about me, and how can this story be as much hype or whatever as possible.
Exactly.
I think it's interesting that you've been in this position for so long, that you've worked so hard your whole life to do all these things and to keep doing them, and really you've given most of your energy, not all of it, but a lot of your energy into a cooperative and collaborative spirit and formation, working with Mr. Jamal for a very, very long time. And I think that for someone to do that, I don't think I could be wrong, but I don't think a lot of people would, no matter how great the obviously Mr. Jamal is a force of forces, but I guess people, everybody's going to want to be like, yeah, but okay, now when am I going to turn the corner and this is going to be about me?
Right.
Like when people were coming up through Miles's groups, it was like that was like I got that mark, and now I can go sell that,
and do my
whatever.
thing, right.
And so I feel like that you've got this very egoless way of going about what you've been doing, but have all the reason in the world to not do it that way, if that makes sense.
I've always been, I don't consider myself a great soloist. I like to solo. I like to But I like the energy of the effort, the total effort, because the total effort affects the whole thing, and the audience feels that and gets that. And their reaction at the end, hopefully, is like, wow, this was outrageous. I'm excited out of my seat. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And to me, it's not about me soloing or being an individual soloist, but it's me trying to support whatever that particular artist I'm working with, like in this case, Mr. Jamal, who is, well, he's an alien. People like him, Chick Corea, Einstein, people like that, to me, they're aliens because they are above the average pursuit of artistry. Mr. Jamal was born with this in his system when he was a little kid, like quite a few other people, prolific. And so for me to be a part of that is enough for me. Not necessary to go off on my own and say, okay, it's time for me to do my thing, although I like doing my thing.
Sure.
I have things I've written.
Sure.
You know, I have a little CD that's floating around in the airways somewhere. I don't know where it is. I haven't had anybody to help me promote it.
Sure.
Because they don't like it or it doesn't fit their thing.
Yeah.
But not to be sure, I like to bring out my own voice and my own writing and thought. But I have a lot of fun and excitement, especially if I can see the vision that someone else, this creative person I'm working for, has, and it appeals to me also. I enjoy supporting that because I think that support is like the backbone of a score, say a music score, a composer, somebody like Ravel or Debussy. They create and write a score for an orchestra, and the effect is exhilarating for the audience, for the listener. I like being a part of that because I think that's more important. Soloists, yes, it's great. You know, there's a few of them that are out there that are just prolific. But I think the biggest excitement, the biggest bang is when the whole effort comes across as a monumental piece, as a monumental statement, as a monumental story. That's why I think about movies the way I do and special effects the way I do, because of the end result. The end result is tremendous. You look at a film and you look at everything that goes into that film, the film editor, the camera work, all this intricate stuff that is a part of that production. That end result is what the great artists, the great directors, all these people that work underneath them catch the vision of what they're thinking about. They see the vision and they say, okay, we're going to do everything we can to bring that vision across. Now, to be sure, you have someone at the top, the writer, that says, you know, I got this vision of this story, but I need the people to implement it. Here I am. I'll help you implement it. I see what you're talking about. So that's the same way I think as a bass player and as a musician. And I feel so fortunate to be a part of, in some small way, a part of Mr. Jamal's musical environment. And you know, and it's, to me, it's a great privilege. You know.
Well, it seems to me like it's also it's a mutual consideration from what I understand from the outside looking in. It's like it seems like that he has always felt the same way. I mean, his latest record is kind of the first solo piano stuff that he's, I mean, okay, this guy's been making records since like the early 50s or whatever, and here we are finally getting sort of these solo pieces, which I know there's a few that you played on as well, but just the idea that, from what I gathered, that was a little bit like pulling teeth a little bit. It wasn't an instinct to like, okay, now I'm going to make this thing. It was like somebody had to kind of like, I guess whoever produced it or whatever it was, sort of pulled that into, wrestled that into reality, but it wasn't part of the instinct. Right. And that's really a testament to the idea of how, what I see it for Mr. Jamal is that this collaborative, interactive, human
Yes.
conversational vibration or whatever about playing, and is what really excites him. And it's not, so it seems like you guys are sort of similar in that way, where you're always thinking about the larger
think so.
construct. Yeah.
I mean, I think Mr. Jamal just plays because that's just what he does.
Yeah.
He can't help himself.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in his hat.
Yeah.
He has a tremendous, I'm assuming he has a tremendous library of music, classical, standards, movie scores, all kinds of things in his head. And he is such an alien, he can take it out at any moment. And that will be a part of his improvisational structure, his improvisational pursuit, his statement, just because it comes from a library that's gigantic. You know, if your library is big, your statements are going to be pretty big and prolific. And to me, that's the way he plays. He plays, especially now. I don't know if anyone's watching, but you know, his playing with the quartet is really great. But my favorite stuff that he does is the in between, the rubato. His rubato stuff to me is prolific because it's about what's happening in here. It's not what's happening over here or over here and the shredding, but there's this understanding and interplay of coloration. You know, like an artist takes color and he paints and he paints and he paints. To me, that's the real deal. And I love when he cues me in to kind of improvise with him, because he allows me to be a part of that process in a supportive way. I have to always think supportive, not soloistic, even though it gets dangerous. But I always have to think, so I like to try to support that pursuit of improvisational moment, you know, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Fully makes sense. Well, it's sort of like he's inviting you into his palette, but that doesn't mean you're the one putting paint on the brush.
No.
You just know what the threshold of the spectrum is that you're to operate in and to uphold or uplift, and that makes total sense. I mean, how that mechanically makes sense in terms of playing bass inside what Ahmad Jamal is thinking, I don't have any idea how to even put that into a context. That, you know, it's like asking somebody, like, you know, what is it like to do a high wire act or whatever. It's like, you know, I'm sure that it's littered with sort of something really plain and simple, as much as it is something otherworldly and outside of yourself, and you just kind of ride that line.
Yeah, you know, as far as me joining that, you know, it's funny. As a kid, I used to listen. Like I said, I grew up listening to a lot of stuff on television and on the radio and records. My mother and father, strangely enough, we were this little Afro-American, you know, not rich, you know, not poor totally, because we did have what we needed, but my mother and father had all these old records, you know, of Nat King Cole and different singers like that, Ella Fitzgerald, and I mean, really had those records, Johnny Mathis. And as a little one, maybe 2 years old, 3 years old, I heard that, and I was jumping out of my socks hearing it. I loved it. And then when I got old enough to stand high enough where the television was, you know, they were on.
When it used to be a piece of furniture.
Yeah, a piece of furniture with four legs. Yeah, well, I was just that high. So, of course, I'm standing in my diapers looking directly at the television, and television was much higher quality back then. You saw symphony orchestras performing fully for an hour or two. Fully. You saw Duke Ellington and his band shredding a chart to death. And I saw that, and it got underneath my skin, like inadvertently. Brought to you by some kind of dish soap, and then back to the shredding. Man, it was. I can see it. I can feel it and see it right now. Because all those, and just even some of the things on television, like the commercials, simple things like that. Back then, they had such a creative process. Even with the limited techniques they had, their genius took over, and it allowed them to really bring a vivid story across, even in a simple commercial. I mean, I saw countless stop motion animation techniques in some of these commercials.
Absolutely, yeah.
So all these things affected me in a great way and brought me into this realm called music. And it just put this want to do that.
What is the musical equivalent of stop motion, you think? Like, would that be like sort of almost like iterating some sort of scale at a tempo or something? Or I don't know.
That's funny that you
yeah.
I don't think there's an equivalent, so to speak. I think there's just a process.
But like, does it have an effect? Like
stop motion.
Yeah.
I think stop motion is just another one of the techniques of bringing the story across.
Yeah.
It's just such a crazy technique. I don't know how to describe that.
Just playing nothing but muted strings.
I don't know. I think just the process of bringing music across.
Yes.
And also in coming from a creative mind and a creative heart and spirit, I think that's becomes has the same effect as maybe something like stop motion, because it affects the audience, it affects the listener, and it draws an emotion out of them. It reaches in and says, it throws this color at them in a vivid way from the creative mind of whoever's doing it, and it says, here, come over here, check this out.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you feel very sad right now with my collection of notes.
Yeah.
And voila.
Yeah.
You're in tears.
Yeah.
Wiped out. I can't tell you how many times I have been that way.
Yeah.
And then another instance, I'm going to make you jump out of your seat, measure by measure. I'm going to make you watch the cliffhanger, but I'm going to knock you out with this music. And that music's going to enhance the fact that the car's about to drop over the cliff.
Yes. Well, let me tell you right now, like, I'll never forget when I first heard Ahmad Jamal live in Paris '92, Acorn.
Was I playing fretless bass on that?
Yeah, and I think it was
because
the drummer was Bowler.
Dave Bowler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that stuff was. I mean, you know, again, I was talking with my friend Scott about this recently, but we were just kind of looking back at like our sort of journey through, you know, your work and associated things, and we were just thinking about how, you know, when we were really young, you know, it's like any other kid, right? Like you want to be amazed. Everything's like a stunt show, right? Like I want to be blown away by the human limits of what can be done musically and fusion and like all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it was such a you know, and then we were starting to figure out, and we were kind of getting through, you know, phase one of like really trying to understand Miles Davis or whatever it is when you're really young. You're like, oh, there's this whole, oh, well, so that modal jazz came from, wait, so what is that? And then you start to kind of trace everything, and then you start to unearth all these things. Like I said, we didn't have the internet, so it was sort of like you start to correlate stuff, and then you get curious and you go find it.
Yep.
And I just remember hearing that stuff from the mid 80s and early 90s period, which was, you know, that was some pretty fiery stuff. Probably the most raucous of your interaction with what you got, you know, what you guys have been doing. But I guess my point is just that it was such an epiphany to, in the pursuit of all this other sort of fusion, chop kind of music, whatever, all of a sudden there was something that was just as capable as any of those other things. It wasn't about this contest anymore. It became musical and fluid and human and liquid in this way that all of a sudden just, it kind of brought me full circle to realize that everything that I had been in the pursuit of in my early times of understanding music, it all came back to that musicality.
That to me, it's. I love shredding. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it cannot take the place of the true end-all musical experience. Shredding has to be a part of the story. And shredding has, I call it shredding, it's silly to call it, but all this stuff, it has to create something. It can't just be a shred for shred's sake, which a lot of us end up doing. Sure. I'm guilty sometimes.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. I mean, I'm guilty. I'm not going to say I'm not.
Maybe a couple times I've heard you go off the deep end.
Yeah, foolishly.
No.
But, my quest always has been really create a thing. And some of my all my favorite, whether it's straight ahead jazz or contemporary jazz or even smooth jazz or classical music, my favorite moments in that is when that story comes across, when the theme comes across in a prolific way, in a creative way, the coloration of it, the how it's stretched, how it's squashed together, how it's colorized, how it's supported, how the theme is thrown in different places, how the structure of music is gigantic. It's a universe of application and thought and ideas, and it's not limited. It is limited to your creativity as a writer, and then as a performer of it, to imagine it, your part and your functionality in that process.
Yeah.
It's when that comes across, then we're talking about music. Shredding is cool, but it's got to have a musical functionality. Otherwise, it's just shredding into the air.
Yeah.
It's like it's in the air.
You're like, look at me. But yeah. So, what is the most challenging, difficult, unfun? What is the hardest part of what you've been doing for so long?
What's the hard part?
Yeah, like what's the either the part that you're like, man, if it was all this but this part, like it would be nirvana. Or if it's something where it's just like, the hardest thing for me, just curious about sort of your unique perspective on the challenges, because kind of like what we were talking about on the way over was just sort of about, there's this kind of illusion, I think, where people think that like once you're there, you're just kind of there.
Yeah.
But you're always learning, you're always striving, you're always overcoming things.
Is this musical or
everything? Life,
everything,
whatever,
life. Yeah. Well, I find the business, especially the business today, is really, really destructive to the musical artist. And I think comparably, there's only a few people that can break through and truly realize whatever they're doing. I think there are very few people in this world of music today, true artists. I mean, really people who are pursuing the art, really break through and present their artistry to the public in a way that people will appreciate it, and large numbers of people can appreciate it. Those audiences are small, either because the mindset of the audience, or the outreach for the artist. It's very difficult business today because everybody can do it. And the techniques that we had years ago, the supportive techniques of a record company, people who had money to support it, are dwindled away. Yeah. Drastically. Yeah. So those are, to me, that the business part is very difficult to deal with. And it's me, even if I wanted to realize something for myself, I don't think I could do it because maybe my music might not be as appealing to the middleman. We even though we don't have to have middlemen today, I think the middlemen that are in the middle that have the ability to take your product and present it to the public in a very big way, in a very efficient way, so everyone has an opportunity to listen and appreciate it and get a hold of it, is limited. It's limited because of their own lack of appreciation for the art. Yeah. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
Did I say something stupid?
No, you didn't. I mean, I feel like there's so many, anything in visual art, I mean, anything in any medium that you can kind of think of that is creative, I think, is in this strange period right now where it seems like it's very contradictory. And on one sense, anything is possible. Anyone can discover what you do. The internet, it's wide open. It's the new frontier. And at the same time, it's like everybody's kind of just getting lost in the noise, and then you got to find people that understand how to cut through this sort of noise and put things in the right place at the right time, so, to the right audience, and really stand behind it and believe in it and understand it. And that is a strange thing. It seems like the technology would be in a place where it's almost like you could fail upwards now because it's so easy, but it's actually the opposite. I think that's kind of almost what was more happening in the 70s, like when labels kind of reached this level of like anybody could get a pretty decent record deal,
Yes. So of course, coming out of the woodwork is Joan Blow or Joe Blow, who practice in their bathtub.
Yeah, I got some of their records. Not bad.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. It's. I think our musical airways are, in general, our artistic airways are being bombarded by mediocrity, by hearsay, by fashion, by it looks like this, so you got to get that, instead of like the true appreciation for what the art is and the pursuit of that particular artist, and a level that's much higher than normal. That's missing today to me. It's about the look, like we were saying before, like I was saying before. The character role is gone. It's personality that takes precedence. It's me doing this takes precedence, instead of this story is about to be presented to you by this whole thing, this team of great artists, from the film editor, the guy that runs the camera, the lights,
an assembly of craftsmen.
Yeah.
That really deeply care and are on their own quest. They're finally all collaborating. And
see the vision. And see the vision.
Yeah.
And see the vision of what's been, the story. See the vision of the story. And, it always takes a person to write the story and have this collective mind, but everyone else has to see the vision. I think there's just too many stars out there, and not enough of true artists pursuing the art, because it is a beautiful thing. Art is a beautiful thing, whether it's vocal, instrumental, sculpture, literature. It is a great thing, especially when it's brought to a high level or presented from someone who has a high level of ability, God-given ability. And I think it's missing today, big time. So I think we have a lot of record companies, promoters, managers, producers, agents who accommodate that mindset instead of really allowing some of the greater artists to come through.
Yeah. It's almost like there's like a string of people all inter-relying on each other. I don't know what that is. That is not my phone. But anyway, so, cheers to whoever did that. So, but I feel like what you're talking about in terms of the record industry and all the people involved is, it feels like that where things fall apart is that there's all these people that are relationally sort of correlated to each other that are all unfortunately defaulting to this kind of mode of self-preservation or orientation of what they're accomplishing to the self, as opposed to the selfless, and saying, I have these tools, I am this craftsman, I can't do all of this by myself, but I want to employ and bring in all these people. That's what I think is, again, so cool about Mr. Jamal, is it's like talking about somebody that can just do anything that they want to do.
Yes.
And his vision and his execution of that has been pretty tried and true and pretty straight ahead. I have a weird question for you.
And it's groundbreaking.
Yeah.
It's always been groundbreaking. Everyone's learned from what we do in an improvisational way. Mr. Jamal, this is a great thing I like about playing with him. He allows the ensemble to support his improvisational thought patterns. Now, you have to have an A-team for that. You understand what I mean by an A-team?
Yeah.
You have to have a drummer, a percussionist, and a bass player that collectively can function in a way that allows him total improvisational pursuit. So when he has a group like that, he can do that to the nth degree, as much as he wants, as long as he wants. And his mind never gets bored up here. He's always creating a coloration, a thought in his just in his improvisational perspective. So I'm not bragging about us, but I think we are the A-team for him.
Yeah.
Including Herlin Riley,
Yeah.
great timekeeper, great drummer and musician. Him and fantastic percussionist Manola Badrina. Myself, I'm kind of joining with them.
Put yourself in there.
I think we've been considered the A-team for him.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And I'm not bragging or anything, but I think the way we operate, we allow him the utmost in his improvisational pursuit of music.
I love it. So it's evident, right? And that's what's so cool. Even if somebody listens and they're not acutely aware of the mechanics of that, the relationship and how that works, it's something that you're gonna feel that. But I think that one of the weirder kind of questions I had was like, because in acknowledgement of, yes, like by time and history and everything, you guys, all the people you mentioned are certainly the A-team. There's been points where other people have come in and out.
Yes, absolutely.
So you've got whatever, John Hurd or Idris Muhammad or these various characters through the years that have had their times.
Yes.
I guess what I was curious about was like say in the case of John Hurd or somebody like that, do you seek out kind of like, what did they do when they were put into this environment that might be illuminating or telling? Like, is it of any intellectual interest to listen to what other bass players did, perhaps on the same tunes, just to kind of sort of go, oh, that's kind of interesting, not to borrow from stuff or to cop somebody. I'm just saying, because it really is this, whether somebody's present and you're collaborating with them, or whether someone comes in, leaves a document and moves on.
Right. It's
still part of this progression.
Yeah. I think I always listen to everything as much as I can, because it does fuel my perspective. It helps me, it enhances my ability to do what I need to do.
Yeah.
In listening to different perspectives.
Yes.
Different ways of approaching things. Let's go back to the original. Israel Crosby and Vernell Fournier. Prolific drum and bass team. They supported Ahmad perfectly. Israel Crosby picked bass notes in the realm of each song that fit Mr. Jamal's pursuit perfectly, selflessly, but prolifically. He's one of my favorite bass accompanists. He accompanied Mr. Jamal to the nth degree. And it was simple, but yet his musical choices were so right on. It was like Mr. Jamal wrote it. He wrote the bass part, every note. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
But it was Israel Crosby understanding of what he needed to do as a bass player, and how he had to listen a certain way, and then made a judgment call of notes to support what Mr. Jamal was doing. And so you hear the functionality of what the bass does. And so people like him I listen to, and I gravitate to him. And people like that, I gravitate to what they do, because it helps me understand what my functionality is as a bass player in this time frame. So I don't lose any strength, any strength of that. I don't lose any sense of artistry. I always try to get it right by listening to people like him, like Ray Brown, the great Ray Brown. Some of the old unsung heroes like George Duvivier. You never hear his name.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
I love research. I'm sure he's online somewhere. Yeah. George Duvivier. I listened to some of his bass playing, and it was astounding. The bass notes that were chosen, and the way he played. Not soloing, not even getting around to soloing. Just the notes he picked within the boundaries of the situation musically. It's so important to me, because to me that has the end effect.
Yeah. So now when you're like, you know, so excited, my wife and I are going to go see you guys play tonight at the Skirmer Symphony Hall here in Nashville, which is super exciting. I know you guys haven't really been here, which we were talking about earlier. It kind of blows my mind, right? But it kind of, you know, Nashville and jazz have had a strange, I think, history. But super excited about that. But I guess I was just curious about, you know, it's kind of, I have this question I think a lot with anybody that's done something that's very successful, where it's like, okay, I have not asked you about your set list tonight, but I know that there will be certain quotations and certain things on the menu that will absolutely be there. And I'm not even going to mention what they are, because I just know you got to play the hits, right? On some level.
I guess so, but like I said, I can't supersede anything that Mr. Jamal does. I know he does certain things, but I don't know if he's going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing. I could be totally wrong.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. Please surprise me. And I'm not saying, I guess what I'm curious about though is just, it's more about how, like when you're doing the same exercise over and over again, playing this, having this guided experience through a song over and over and over again, to the point where like you feel like probably you've explored every pathway, but there's always another one. There's always another one. There's always another one. Is that a different musical sort of mentality and modality? Like it's almost like a monk with the sand, painting or something. Is there something about doing the same thing for 35 years that is breeding a different type of experience or enlightenment or knowledge for you that perhaps maybe the newer, fresher things do?
How do I answer that? I think no matter how many times you play something, let me come from that angle. No matter how many times you play something, especially if it's a great piece or a great environment that the piece finds itself in, for me, as a specific musician, as a bass player, I'm excited to play that tune 1,000 times over. Why? Because of the pure artistry of it. Not because, we're going to play this again. Do we have to play this again? No, I don't think of it that way.
Yeah.
I always think of it as...
You got
to get to this, man. You got to get this. It's musical, it's artistic, and the way Mr. Jamal, now he's our director. Keep that in mind. I say, quotes, our director. Like he's the conductor.
Yeah.
So he does it the way he wants it. He directs it the way he wants. The arrangement goes the way he wants, and we don't know which way it's going to go. Never. Until we're in it. And it's fun. And sometimes we don't even know the repertoire that we're going to do.
Yeah.
He got us this time. This in San Francisco. We played about a month and a half ago. And we spent 4 days. And we rehearsed the day before we actually started. And he threw a wrench in this works, but we played it because we were the A team. We knew what to do.
Yeah.
We rehearsed a few tunes that, we probably would touch on. The first day of the gig, totally different set. Almost all the way through, totally different set. Tunes that we haven't played since the 80s. As that team, we were this same group was the group that was originally with him when I first started with him, Herlin, Riley, and Manola. He played a bunch of things from there that we hadn't even rehearsed. And you're talking about, oops, oh boy, I had to put a thinking cap on, lickety split, like right then and there. Thank God we were able to pull it off, but boy, it was hairy.
Yeah.
But it shows you the necessity to be a functioning supporter of what he does.
Always be ready.
Always be ready for the unexpected.
Yeah.
What to expect from him? The unexpected. Always. So my antennas have to be 30 feet in the air ready for anything that's happening.
I love it. I love it that he's 89 years young.
Yes.
He is keeping people on their toes. You know what I mean? Like, I love this. This is so amazing.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm the old guy now. When I first started with him, I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And I was like the kid.
Yeah.
For a long time. And it scared me. And now it scares me even worse because I'm the old guy.
Yeah.
He's 89 years old. And every time he sits to the piano, there's no gaps. It just, boom, we're on it. Let's go.
Unreal.
Only time we get up says, I think I'm going to go and eat now. It's time for us to go eat. Time's up. Okay. And that's it. Otherwise, we're in it. And he's intense on it. It's pretty serious. And
I love that. It's not just like it's nice that people can still play this music and great. Like it's no. This is still pushing forward.
This is a pursuit of the artistry of improvisation.
I love it.
It's a serious pursuit.
It's really inspiring, man.
And he's at the top of the heap when it comes to that.
Yeah.
He's Mr. I'm going to do this to this and this and to this. Even if I said I was going to do this before, I'm going to do this, and I love it. As a bass player, as a musician still trying to figure this stuff out, I love it because it really challenges me to the nth degree as a musician. It challenges my library. It challenges my bass playing all the time, technically, physically, and mentally. And the end result is a true great piece of artistry to me. You know, it's not a moment of like, okay, we're going to shred and shred and shred and shred.
Yeah.
It is a moment of great musical history to me.
Well, that's, and that's where I'd like to sort of end up here is because, it means a lot that you would take the time to sit down and talk with me today. And it's been real cool to do that. And it's going to be really great, obviously, to hear you tonight and in Nashville, not somewhere else, in Music City proper.
Yeah.
But it is hard not to. I try to pay attention to things, I suppose, and I feel like as much as we're not on this is not a history tour, this is not a retrospective, mm-hmm. right? This is just another. Sort of part of this continuum that has been unfolding for a long time. It's impossible for me though not to just sit back and observe how much of an impact that all of what you guys have done has affected me in my life and what it's given me. And just there's just levels of joy and amazement and all the out of the seat stuff and all the other things where it's like, I feel lucky to have been alive at the same time that this was happening. And I feel lucky to be alive, to be able to sit down and talk to you about it. And I think about how I felt, when I was a kid or whatever, and like meeting Pharoah Sanders or people like this, where it's just like, I can't believe I'm on the same planet in the same space as these aliens are right now,
Yep.
As you put it, aliens, aliens. I am just very grateful to have been cognizant enough when I was young to sort of pick up on a lot of this stuff, to be able to watch the story unfold, and the story that you guys have been telling and are going to continue to tell is just something of such importance and of value to so many people. And I just hope that that you know that other people get a lot from the life force that you've given.
Well, I'll tell you, I have to say I'm honored. Thankful to God first. He gets credit first, right off the bat.
Yeah.
Because I can't do anything unless he gives me the ability to do it. I am honored for the ability to, in my very limited way, to even bring that kind of music across and to be a part of something this heavyweight, to play with someone like Mr. Jamal. I'm totally honored every time I step anywhere near the stage, let alone having to get on the stage at 8 o'clock at night and for the downbeat in front of many people to be able to pursue music with this man. So for me, every step of the way has been an honor and a privilege to me, and I do it in my very limited way, but I do the best I can with it, and that's all I can say.
Well, well, you're doing just fine. I don't have any specific recommendations for you about, okay. I don't have any tips or tricks for your playing.
Oh yeah, YouTube trips, tips and trips.
Yeah, like I don't know, dude, play that faster. I don't know.
No.
So listen, we're gonna get out of here, and I'm gonna get you to your next stop. But again, thank you, Jim. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor,
thank you.
for real.
Man, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this.